Today we're going to talk about the three ledger system, and if you're following in your textbook, we're on page 352. We're going to talk about advantages of a three ledger system, and we're going to talk about something new called a subsidiary ledger and control account. We're going to talk about changing or spreading out the division of labor, and we're going to verify each of the three ledgers by preparing a general ledger trial balance, a schedule of accounts payable, and a schedule of accounts receivable. So as a business increases, what happens is there's more accounting that needs to be done. Uh, and as there's more accounting that needs to be done, usually what happens is there's more customers and there's more people that you would be buying items from as well. So there would be more accounts payable. If you look at this diagram down here, in a small business like we did in accounting 10, these would be your accounts that you would see. Now, in a large business like we were talking about in accounting 20, the one area that increases the most is going to be your accounts receivable. Your accounts receivable in a small company could be as few as 10, and in a large company could be 10,000. And what happens with that is when you go to do a balance sheet, if you list each of your accounts receivable, your balance sheet's going to be really, really bulky. The same thing applies for accounts payable. It says here it's necessary to keep individual accounts for each of these creditors in order to have an accurate record of the amount owed and the payment due date for each. However, you don't have to list that on your balance sheet. All that you need is on the balance sheet is a summary figure, which is a total of all of the individual accounts. So what we're going to do to help us out with that, we're going to look at a partial general journal that looks like this. Now, this is the old way of doing it. You see how every accounts receivable has their own T accounts, and then you have your accounts payable over here. What we're going to do, same thing there. What we're going to do now is we're going to lump it all together. So here on the balance sheet, you see how everything is separated, like I had showed you earlier. Now, if you can imagine, if we have 10,000 accounts receivable or accounts payable, you can see how big this balance sheet is going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about some subsidiary ledgers. And it contains accounts of similar type, usually organized in alphabetical order. The two most commonly used subsidiary ledgers are accounts receivable and accounts payable. However, these are not the only subsidiary ledgers used by businesses. Whenever there's a large number of similar accounts in the general ledger, it's possible to streamline the ledger by using a subsidiary ledger. An example of another common subsidiary ledger used by firms with a large and varied amount of equipment is an equipment ledger. And I don't actually think we're going to be using that one at all in Accounting 20. Okay, so the first one we're going to create is called our accounts receivable ledger. And what it's going to do is it's going to total up all of your accounts receivable, and it's going to use one amount only. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put all of the customers' names and the amounts that they owe you into something called the accounts receivable control account. The same thing is going to go with the accounts payable. And I think I have an example here to show you as well. Okay, so do you see here in this general ledger, accounts receivable, it's using the total of 1,000. But then in the ledger, it shows how they came up with that 1,000, and you'll see that arrow goes to there. Same thing with accounts payable. Oh, sorry, it's right at the top. $400 there, and it shows in the ledger how they came up with that $400. Okay, so the general ledger is going to be a lot smaller and a lot neater. And then you have to look at the accounts receivable and accounts payable ledgers to see if those numbers match. Now, to verify the accuracy of the ledgers, what you're going to do is create a trial balance again. So you'll see your accounts receivable here and your accounts payable here. once you do that, you also need to attach a schedule of accounts receivable. So you need to list all of the people who owe you money, and you need to make sure that that $1,000 matches what's on the trial balance. After you do that, you need to make the same thing for a schedule of accounts payable, and you need to make sure that that $400 matches what's on your trial balance. So now you're creating 3 different forms. Okay, and the really great thing about doing this is having these subsidiary ledgers is when you have a really big business, one employee can't look after it all. So what this allows you to do is the accounts receivable people look after only the accounts receivable. The accounts payable people look only after the accounts payable. And then by including the schedule of accounts receivable and accounts payable, what that does is it allows the people then to double check the work. And if the owner wants to come in and say, okay, can you tell me where this accounts receivable amount came from? You would show them the schedule instead of showing them all the individual people on the ledger. So it just, as your company gets bigger, you need to become a little bit more efficient in what you do. And you'll see quite often that there's jobs called accounts receivable clerks. Those are people who work in the accounts receivable department and in accounts payable. And then you'll have a supervisor as well.